thank you for taking time out to speak, to speak with us about the Parker Sessions. It's screening at FrightFest soon. Are you excited for the screening?
Out of all the film festivals that Parker Sessions was submitted to and playing, FrightFest was my Harvard submission. So when we got accepted in, I don't really get emotional that often about things, but I definitely teared up. Those were tears of joy. So yeah, it's very, very happy.
So I guess that obviously you're quite familiar then with the festival and its prestige.
Yeah, not only with the lineup of past films that they've had, but I'm very huge fan of Arrow Video. I'm a collector myself, a hoarder of media, and Arrow Video is right next to my Criterion collection. It's they go hand in hand. So it's kind of like it's a dream, it's one of those things that when I submitted to FrightFest, I honestly didn't think that we were going to make it in. So when we did, and I see Parker Sessions on the lineup, it's something special, right next to a lot of other talented actors and directors and writers across the globe. And we all love horror, so.
And for those that haven't read up on the film yet, in a nutshell, what's the hook? What's the Parker Sessions about?
So I've always tried to keep the film in mystery. Even when we were filming it, I had all the actors sign a contract that they weren't allowed to talk about the film, like when they walked off set. And because I didn't want any spoilers, but if I were going to do a short summary, it's about a woman, a mysterious woman that goes to see a counselor about her night terrors that she's been having. And from there, it's kind of chaos, and we kind of dive off the deep end. And it's split up into 4 acts, like a play. I wanted it to have that feel. My second feature, I'm going to be doing the same format. And I wanted to focus more on dialogue and emotion for a horror film rather than, just blood and guts left and right. And I feel like there's true things out in the world that are horrifying and that haven't been explored on film. And usually when I see people screaming on film, it's either, gore porn or the scream just doesn't feel real to me. It comes off fake or kind of cheesy. And the only way I think you can really pull that off successfully is if you're like in an 80s, low budget film where it's actually fun rather than forced. Focusing more on classic storytelling too, than special effects. And I think there's only 4 frames of CGI in the entire film. So, and of course, to sell the film to my producer, there is definitely loads of blood and gore in the film as well. I have to put a trigger warning on the movie every time anyone watches it, because I've noticed that it's not one of the most pleasant films in the world. It's not a feel-good film.
How where did the idea come from? How did this sort of go from an idea out there to this page?
So I've been doing short films for about 10-15 years. Not very good ones when you first start out. And everyone always wanted me to do a feature, and I had to have the right idea if I was going to do that. I didn't want to just do any horror film, and I wanted that to be my first feature too. But this film comes from a very real place. I would say I was Parker in my 20s, for sure. So it's based on real events of my life. There's a real Robert that I knew growing up as a kid. And the film is based on real monsters in life, rather than fictitious ones, that hide in the shadows. And it's also based on real night terrors, anxiety that I suffered through a lot when I was in my 20s. I had debilitating panic attacks to where they would lay me out for 2 to 3 hours at a time, and then when I would go to sleep at night, I would have these just horrible night terrors, and it was usually always the same dream, which all the visuals that you see that Parker talks about of this monster in her night terrors, I mean, those come straight off my journal pages of my dream journals. And her screaming, her drug use, infidelities, and everything that you see are just based on real experiences in my life, and just people watching. And so I would say Parker Sessions is based 80% off of my life, and 20% is fictional. And I think anyone that watches the film will see what the 20% is, that's fictionalized. And same thing with my second feature. It's called Lead Belly, and I'm almost halfway done with the script, and it's in the same universe as the Parker Sessions, but it's based on my teens and everything around there, and my relationship with my brother, my late brother, and my father. And it's a lot darker than Parker Sessions, but it has a little bit more comedy to it.
That's interesting. I mean, the film deals with with night terrors, which years ago wasn't anything that people were particularly aware of, let alone seeing on film. But I think since the documentary The Nightmare, they really do seem to be sort of like creeping into cinema. What do you think it is about them, that makes them so terrifying? Because I mean, I didn't realize until I watched the documentary that I had suffered with night terrors as a child. It wasn't until I saw the documentary that that's what that was.
So when was the last time, if you don't mind me asking you a question, when was the last time you had a night terror?
I mean, it was years ago. It was mainly sort of like late, sort of on the early teenage years that I sort of had them, but I had like the same recurring one, like night after night for months, to the point of I just didn't go to sleep. I got really good at anagrams to keep myself awake. But yeah, I don't know. I just
natural, or
sorry.
Do you believe in the supernatural? Do you think they happen because of energy, or do you believe? Because now I'm starting to believe mine were definitely from past trauma and it bubbling up to the surface.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have necessarily the greatest time around that time, so I think it probably was linked to a trauma thing. But yeah, actually, it wasn't until I watched the documentary that suddenly, like, all these people were sort of explaining something that was like, yeah, no, that's pretty much exactly what used to happen to me. It's just this, because it's a universal way of coping with this stuff.
Yeah, I think the first time that I ever saw anything in the media about night terrors that was like, wow, that's what I have. I mean, I've had sleepwalking, which I'm putting in my second script. It deals a lot with sleepwalking, actually, but I used to have really bad sleepwalking to where I would walk out of my dad's house in the middle of the night from a bunk bed, go out of the garage, go to the next door neighbor's house, knock on their door, sit there for a second, knock on the door again, walk right back to my dad's house, close the garage door again, and go up and go back to sleep like it was nothing. And it was really terrifying. My night terrors, though, and when I first started having them, especially this one, I got threatened by a Robert when I was, a kid. And what he said is, if I were to say anything of what I just saw, that he would come in the middle of the night when I was sleeping, and he would murder me in my sleep, and or do exactly. And I think back then it didn't really register or hit me that hard, you know. And then I just started having these reoccurring nightmares, and it was always about the shadow figure just coming in the middle of the night, and always banging on the windows and just creeping around the house. And finally, you know, he would murder me in my sleep, and I could, you know, see it unfolding as it was happening, as you do in dreams, where everything's kind of like in this different perspective, you know. And but I used to have these nightmares to where I would wake up, that scene where, you know, Parker wakes up and she's screaming Bloody Mary. I don't know how many times. I mean, every time that I move into a new house, I have to tell my neighbors, I have to tell anyone that I'm living with, if you hear me screaming in the middle of the night, please don't call the cops or anything. I'm sleeping. It terrifies, you know, all my past relationships. I think it scares them at first, you know, because I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And then, you know, eventually when you come to, you realize it takes a second because your adrenaline's still going. Sometimes I've had visuals of whoever was in the room talking to me, that they were a demon or a shadow person, until I was coming out of it, because the illusion was still there, you know. I was still under the spell. But a lot of times, yeah, it's you know, you have a heavy chest, you can't move. Everything in the room feels kind of evil, like there's something watching you from all corners of the room. And when I was editing Parker sessions, those night terrors were actually coming back in full. And I also had 2 John Wayne Gacy paintings for inspiration that were real. They were legit from the serial killer. And they were in the room as not like it was kind of like inspiration, but also just kind of helped shape when I was editing and stuff, and shape the mood, to get in the mood every time. But ever since that I've gotten the paintings out of the house, I haven't had extreme night terrors like that since. So I don't know. And those John Wayne Gacy paintings too are owned by Rachell Sean, who's the lead actress in the film. Those were inherited to her. So she's got 2 pieces of morbid murder memorabilia.
I mean, I guess it goes, you know, so my next question would be, you know, obviously it's a very intense role. It's very emotional. You know, there's a lot of darkness to the character. You know, how did you go about finding her?
So I do a Halloween show every year called Noctober Evening here in Salt Lake City, and she's one of the models. So she gets already into these dark characters and walks down a runway. And when we actually started talking, I realized she's never acted before. The only acting that I've ever seen her do is going down the runway, but the way that she could just turn into a character on a dime and then go out of it, I knew she could act. And then the more that we started talking about, you know, our past and our backgrounds and stuff, I realized we had a lot of similarities with, you know, I guess what you would call it is trauma bonding, you know, and she would agree on that. And I was supposed to play Parker. When my producers put money in, they thought I was Parker. And when I started talking to her more, I asked her, do you want to audition to play this lead role? Because I think you would add more layers to it. You would give it something that I couldn't give. And so she read the script and she connected to it in a huge way. And I would say for about 6 to 8 months, she prepared for the role. And she took my script and rewrote the script, not rewriting scenes or dialogue or anything, but she wrote the script by hand just to get it, all the words and stuff down. So it was amazing. Our first day of shooting, my producer, my cinematographer, they were so angry at me for switching, the lead out. And without telling them, without having a group decision, when she finished that day, she hit every line. And there's no improv, and everything is, word for word. Even all the pauses, the awkward, pauses and all that, it had to all be there. And my producer afterwards came up to me and gave me a huge hug and was like, "You're right." She killed it. And that meant a lot for me, because she spent so much time in the role becoming Parker, to where I think it actually kind of, it really got under her skin towards the end. I think she had a hard time after we wrapped, because it was such a dark role. The best part of shooting, I think, is when we went to the carnival and she was able to just eat shrooms and go around, play on rides. And just be herself, and have fun. And we did it linear too. So we started off in a good place, and then the material just slowly, gets darker and darker. But if you look at all the takes and cuts and things like that, even when she's getting choked with a belt, we say, "Cut. Can I get you anything?" And she'll just go, "Oh no, I'm good, thank you. Thank you. Well, actually, could I just get a little bit of water?" And she just smiles, and I'm like, are you sure you're all right? All right, let's roll it. The throw up scene, she wanted her real vomit in the toilet. So we had fake vomit in the other room, but she started getting queasy, because there's that scene where she's drinking wine too. And I kept telling her, I was like, "You don't have to chug every time that you're doing it." And she's like, "Well, that's what the character does, so I'm going to do what the character does." So she got a little sick, and then I was like, "Well, we have this fake throw up." And she goes, no, just let me throw up in there for a second, and then I'll tell you, set up the camera, and then we'll just roll it. And I was like, "Oh, okay." When she's in the bathroom in the shower, she's having she gets herself to have a full panic attack. She goes into full panic attack mode. I think the scariest scene for all of us, and it gave us all chills when it happened, was when she had the night terror scene. And for that scene, she went into a really dark place, and we actually had to wrap that night, because she just needed some time the next day. It was rough.
Yeah, what a performance though. It definitely sort of points that, she might not have acted before, but it definitely points to, she's got the talent and the ability to, to go on and have a career out of this.
Yeah, I even told her, next time that we give her a role, it's going to be the opposite of Parker, like a rom-com or something in France, which I want to do. I want to make 2 horror films, and then I want, my main goal is to make a rom-com that has that 90s charm that I think has been lost over the years. But I think Rachel is phenomenal. She's really brilliant to work with. She's very daring. She just puts herself out there at all times. And if you look at the stuff that she does on the side, you wouldn't even think that she would even do a role like Parker Sessions. She's a leader of a K-pop dance group out here in Salt Lake City, and does she's also she goes to FanX, she does cosplay on all these anime characters. So she's constantly just, morphing and chameleoning into all these characters. And even when there's a scene where she dances and even does a little K-pop dance, and that's just her doing her thing, yeah.
The story, plays out in black and white. What was the thinking about shooting it in that way?
I like the idea of bringing out the shadows more, and enhancing those monsters and those shadows that we're talking about. Also, I've heard things like, you know, when we dream in black and white. I've written in my dream journals that it's been black and white at times. But mostly I'm a huge fan of just old black and white films like Night of the Hunter. Um, and I just lost my train of thought. Black and white to me is also more gritty and just kind of dark. Parker Sessions in a colorful, you know, Technicolor like film just doesn't seem like it would work. And I think the end scene too, the end act would be a little much if it was in color. Um, my second feature is also going to be in black and white, but it's we're aiming for a bigger budget and shooting on a soundstage. So, but I still want that same grittiness and those shadows and the darkness in there. Parker Sessions is part of a trilogy, so it's the first out of 3, and the last one actually deals. It's me when I was a kid, when I was deaf. I was 80% deaf until I was about 3 or 4, and then I was mute up until I was 8. But it's about a little girl that goes to get a hearing operation. She dies on the operating table, and her teddy go to hell instead of heaven because there's a mistake. And the demons and things there, it's kind of like prison, where in prison they may have done a lot of horrible things, but if you're an innocent in prison, they'll treat you right, like you know what I mean. And so it's kind of like a Wizard of Oz, but they're helping this girl, you know, get out of hell. It's called The Devil, Teddy and I. And yeah, and since she's deaf too, she can't hear anything that's going around her. And Teddy is now animated and makes it seem kind of like a dreamlike, so it's not so horrifying, you know, because there's just horrible things going. It's hell. Yeah.
No, it sounds quite interesting. You know, do not to be too, you know, stereotypically female. I like the Teddy angle. So
yeah. And Lead Belly deals with 2 brothers. It's the same kind of short synopsis as Parker Sessions. 2 brothers go visit their father on a summer vacation. Yeah, and things go really bad.
I mean, obviously the film, you know, it does deal with some real world issues and some trauma, and you know, that's apparent in every aspect of the film, you know, even all the way through to the credits. You know, there's a, you know, without sort of, you know, saying too much, you know, there's a shout out in there that you wouldn't normally expect to see. You know, why did you think it was important to include that?
I actually called my mom and I was like, do I do this? You know, she thought, hell yeah, do that. Like, you know, why not? And I've had actually a lot of friends say, don't do that. My producer said, don't do that. And I think we've been actually kicked out of a lot of film festivals because of that. Because I mean, everybody knows everybody. So anyone on that list is a family member or a friend of someone like that. And I think immediately that might be a way to get me booted off of things. But at the same time, it's kind of like Parker Sessions is a very anti-film. It's a punk rock film. And I wanted it to be that from the beginning. I didn't want, you know, certain names to be there. I wanted it to be completely cut out. I wanted to blur out things, you know, and there were certain actors that I would have them just, it would be their head and they're like, well, I've been in like 20 or 30 different movies. Like, why can't my face be shown? And I was like, but movie's not about you. It's about this character and this character. And the same thing with those credits. There's always a, you know, a special thank you and it thanks everybody. I wanted to do a special fuck you to the monsters that the film is raising its middle finger to.
Well, I was definitely a fan of it, and you know, using the platform to, to make people, just to remind people that, this is out there, we shouldn't sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah, and I think these kind of topics too are really taboo. I've noticed just in the few interviews that I've done so far, people kind of tiptoe around the conversation of why I made the movie or what the material's really about and things like that. And I think we're going to see a wave of films like that come out in the next couple of years, just because I think people are starting to be more awoken with that. And for me, it was very therapeutic to do a film like this. It was, I'm kind of nervous because my producer's always like, don't, I've got to censor myself. So I'm like censoring things out and then getting nervous on my face. Yeah, I just think there's going to be a wave and a revolution of new films like this coming out, of people saying, hey, this is my life and this is a personal story. I don't think every horror movie has to be Freddy Krueger or, a person going around with a machete. I love those films, don't get me wrong. I mean, I grew up on those movies, but I think there's a lot more that we can do with that genre, because I saw this movie Irreversible by Gaspar, over at Sundance about, 15 years ago or something. And it kind of changed my life, just because the way that he didn't shy away from the grittiness, that he kept the camera on what was going on. And what he said in an interview was that they said, well, why didn't you just cut away from it? Why does it have to be a 12-minute sexual assault scene? And he said, well, that's not real life. And he goes, in real life, it is not a cutaway. The camera does not pan. And yeah, I've never seen anything horrific. Do I want to watch that all the time? No, but I think it was a story and something, a topic worth visiting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess sort of my final question would be, FrightFest pass holders are, working out what they're going to watch, when they're going to watch it during the festival. What are they going to get from your film that they might not get from some of the other films that are on offer? Why should they take a punt on it?
I hope that they would get a surreal experience, something that, you're walking into a nightmare, an actual nightmare that unfolds. And I hope it's a different, horrifying experience. And what I hope for some people getting out of it is that they have their own story to tell after the credits roll, and that it helps them feel less alone.